Poor Chief Justice John Roberts. He is upset that the public is mad at him for his overly broad, overly confusing immunity decision. What's a Chief Justice to do? Let's discuss. I'm Dave Aronberg, State Attorney for Palm Beach County, aka the Florida Lawman, here on the MeidasTouch Network. Chief Justice John Roberts, who wants the public to buy in to the Supreme Court as an apolitical institution, an institution that's above politics, even though they're appointed by presidents who have political agendas. He wants you to believe that they're just following the law. Well, then Dobbs happened, overturning 50 years of precedent, even though several members of that court that voted to overturn Roe versus Wade, they said under oath in their Senate hearings that Roe versus Wade was settled law. Then there were the ethical issues like Clarence Thomas failing to report all these lavish gifts by right-wing donors. You had Justice Alito, whose wife was flying an upside-down American flag at his own home, claiming he didn't know much about it, and then said it wasn't political, and then he keeps changing his story. And so you can see why there's a crisis of confidence in the Supreme Court. But Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, was seen as the bridge builder, the guy who actually voted to save Obamacare. Remember, 5-4 ruling. The guy who voted with the liberals to preserve Roe versus Wade. Yes, Dobbs was actually a 5-4 decision on the question of whether Roe versus Wade would be overturned. But then something happened. Apparently he didn't like being part of the minority. As Chief Justice, he wanted to flex his muscle and show that he's in charge, he's in control. So not only did he start joining the majority, the Clarence Thomases and Alitos of the world, he got ahead of them and started leading the way, waving the flag. And now the public has had a backlash against him in the Supreme Court. And he's shocked about it, just shocked that he's found gambling in this establishment. But we shouldn't be surprised. I mean, his Supreme Court ruling in the immunity case was so overbroad, so confusing, so beneficial to Donald Trump. It looks like he put his thumb on the scale, and the timing of it was such where the Supreme Court could have gotten involved earlier when Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court, please intervene now before the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals rules. Time is of the essence. We want to get this done before the election. And the U.S. Supreme Court said, no, not getting involved. We don't need to get involved. So the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled very thoroughly, very fine opinion. And then the U.S. Supreme Court then said, yeah, now we're going to put a hold on it. Now we're going to delay, and now we're going to overturn them, and we're going to shut this whole thing down. We're going to prevent this case from going before the election. And so you can see why the rest of us are like, come on, dude, if you're wanting to see why the public has such little faith in the Supreme Court, then look in the mirror. You're the one who wrote the opinion in the immunity decision. You're the one who ignores any ethics reform on the Supreme Court. You can make it happen, but you're not. CNN reports that Roberts was shaken by the adverse public reaction to his decision affording Trump substantial immunity from criminal prosecution. His protestations that the case concerned the presidency, not Trump, held little currency. Unlike most of the justices, he made no public speeches over the summer. Colleagues and friends who saw him said he looked especially weary, as if carrying greater weight on his shoulders. On Monday, after he ascended the bench to formally open a new session, Roberts hewed to a familiar script and kept any emotion in check. The Supreme Court's stature has shrunk, according to multiple polls. In July, for example, after the immunity decision was released and the annual session ended, fewer than half Americans expressed a favorable opinion of the court, according to a Pew Research Center survey. That favorable rating was 23 percentage points lower than in August 2020, when the conservative supermajority on the 9-member bench took hold. Part of the drop, no doubt, tracks the court's 2022 decision overturning abortion rights, a decision to which Roberts partially dissented. Well, I'm surprised that their ratings are even that high. I don't think many people have a lot of faith in the Supreme Court to do the right thing anymore. Maybe Donald Trump does, but as far as the rest of us, and that includes people who are registered independents, and even Republicans who are not part of the MAGA movement. I mean, pretty much everyone can see what has happened to the Supreme Court. I mean, that immunity decision that says that presidents are presumed to be above the law was just so overbroad. The Roe versus Wade decision, well, the Republicans are going to see the impact. Women never forget. They're going to see in November how disturbed the public is about that decision, how you don't go ahead and overturn 50 years of precedent and get away with it so easily. You don't go ahead and lie before the U.S. Senate saying that Roe versus Wade is settled law, and then shortly thereafter overturn Roe versus Wade and get away with it. So I have a feeling Republicans in Congress, in the Senate, and the former president are going to rue the day that this Supreme Court decided to do something so radical, so unprecedented that it shocked the conscience for so many Americans. And then leave it to the great Supreme Court analyst Dalia Litwick to really put the exclamation point on this. The Chief Justice, she wrote in Slate, or so the legend holds, was a moderate conservative until he became a moderate until he morphed into a MAGA warrior last term. He was a humble minimalist until he turned into a grasping maximalist. He started his reign as a Chief Justice as a coalition forger and then changed into a coalition destroyer. And as we continue to scratch our heads over where he has come from and where he has gone, one final mystery continues to confound. Whatever happened to the chief's legendary capacity to read the room? Yes, exactly. Chief Justice Roberts used to be able to read the room and understand that the public would not tolerate an overturning of the Affordable Care Act. So he saved it. He found that the taxation clause of the Constitution allowed there to be a penalty if you did not get insurance, and therefore the act was constitutional. It's really something that wasn't argued at great length in front of Chief Justice Roberts. Remember, they were talking about the Commerce Clause, and they were talking about various other issues within the Constitution, but he relied on the taxation clause to say, yeah, the Affordable Care Act is okay. 5-4 ruling saved the day. But then he's changed. He failed to read the room that if he went ahead and decided to enact this broad immunity, the public would hate it. I mean, it's not just that he voted with the majority in the immunity decision. He wrote the decision. He froze out the liberals on the court, refused to let them take part in it. In fact, he froze out Amy Coney Barrett, one of his supposedly MAGA warriors appointed by Donald Trump, who didn't like this other overbroad section where you said you can't even collect evidence when you investigate a president or a former president if it involves something that's part of his core constitutional duties, meaning that you can't investigate the former president when it comes to evidence from the Attorney General's office, from Jeffrey Clark, who worked for the DOJ. That's off limits. So not only can you not prosecute him, you can't even research and collect evidence if it's within the former president's core constitutional duties. Really a broad opinion. That was 5-4 on that one. That was even too broad for Amy Coney Barrett. But according to Dalia Litwick, the Chief Justice was meant to be the one with the savvy to understand the stakes for the court and the country. But Roberts has either developed a tin ear when it comes to public opinion, or, more worrying still, he has not just frozen out the liberal justices, as Cantor and Liptak put it last month, those are two other observers, but has actually frozen out any feedback or media sources that might have warned him that the public mood was not going to be welcoming of near blanket immunity from a coup-fomenting president, even if that decision came trussed up in magisterial language about the separation of powers and the safeguarding of the unitary executive. And as I've said, this is a reason, I think, why Chief Justice Roberts has been so blind to the ethical abuses of Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, members of the court. It's like he doesn't care. He wants you to believe in the court, but at the same time, he won't even lift a finger to make things right, or at least to put in some reforms to at least make people believe things are right. At minimum, the fact that the new John Roberts may be tuning out any of the voices that are critical of the High Court's current public approval trajectory would explain why he has failed absolutely to take seriously the ethics violations of his colleagues, failed to show up for congressional hearings when summoned, and even seemingly failed to concern himself with the court's nosediving public confidence numbers. If you can persuade yourself that absolutely every critique is a left-wing conspiracy to discredit the integrity of the institution, then nothing negative said about the court need to be taken seriously. And once you have lost your ability to read the room because you think the room is full of liars, whiners, and liberal operatives, you're going to keep misjudging how much rank partisanship the American public will tolerate. And that's the final point. If Chief Justice Roberts just thinks that his critics are a bunch of lefties, a bunch of left-wing Antifa, anti-American communists, well, he's going to be quite disappointed when he sees the election results in November, because his opinions are helping to energize the people in the country who are in the middle. And those people have been moving towards Kamala Harris. And perhaps down deep he knows that his critics aren't just a bunch of partisan hacks, because that's why he's all of a sudden upset at the way that things are going, not giving public speeches, being a lot quieter on the bench, not being a different person. His whole mood has changed, and you can see why. He has only himself to blame. 2024 continues to be the year of consequences, of accountability, and it's not over yet. So that's the latest Meidas Mighty. I'm Dave Aronberg, aka the Florida Lawman. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Also, leave a comment below. I love reading your comments and try to respond to as many as I can. Also, check out our sister channel, True Crime MTN, where we discuss the latest and hottest true crime cases, anything from Diddy to Garth Brooks to the Kohberger mass murder case in Idaho, the Idaho 4. So I'll see you over there, and I'll see you here next time.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.